Thousands of years ago, long before people even knew that America existed, the native tribes of this land lived peaceful lives deep within the forests. Among them was a mysterious woman who constantly warned her people about a terrible danger. She believed that one day, devils would arrive from beyond the sea and bring destruction with them. Unfortunately, no one took her warnings seriously. But one day, the very disaster she had predicted finally arrived. Massive Viking ships appeared on the shores of their land. When the woman saw one of these enormous vessels, she was terrified. To her, it looked less like a ship and more like a giant sea monster that had emerged from the depths of the ocean. Curious and frightened, she eventually entered one of the damaged ships. Inside, she discovered a horrifying sight. The vessel was filled with dead bodies. However, among the corpses was a young boy who was still alive. He looked terrified and tightly held a strange weapon in his hand, a sword unlike anything the woman had ever seen before. Even though she didn't understand who he was or where he had come from, she could see the fear in his eyes. Feeling sympathy for the child, she comforted him and brought him back to her tribe. The boy looked completely different from the tribe members, and because of that, many people refused to accept him. They feared he could bring trouble upon them. But the woman insisted on protecting him, and eventually the tribe agreed to let him stay. They gave him a new name, Kale. Life in the tribe wasn't easy for Kale. He was haunted by terrifying nightmares that constantly dragged him back into his painful past. Through these memories, we learn that his father was a Viking warrior, a man feared not only by his enemies, but also by his own people because of his cruelty. When the Vikings arrived in this land, Kale's father mercilessly slaughtered innocent tribe members. Men, women, and even children were shown no mercy. Young Kale witnessed these horrifying acts with his own eyes, and the brutality deeply traumatized him. But his father's cruelty didn't stop there. One day, he placed a sword into Kale's hands and ordered him to kill innocent children as well. Kale couldn't bring himself to do such a horrible thing. Instead, he threw the sword to the ground. The moment he disobeyed, his father was consumed with rage. Determined to punish him, he attacked his own son and even tried to kill him. Terrified, Kale fled for his life and escaped onto another boat before losing consciousness. By the time he finally woke up, everything had changed. The Viking fleet had already sailed away, leaving him behind. All that remained were broken ships and countless corpses scattered across the shore. It was from one of these abandoned ships that the tribal woman eventually found and rescued him. Years pass after these events, and the story moves forward. The frightened little boy who once washed ashore is no longer a child. Kale has now grown into a young man, and his true journey is only beginning. Over the next several years, life remained surprisingly peaceful. The Vikings never returned, and slowly, Kale began building a new life among the tribe that had rescued him. He learned their language, adapted to their customs, and started seeing himself as one of them. But despite all his efforts, many tribe members still viewed him as an outsider. Not far from their territory lived another tribe that shared a strong friendship with Kale's people. The leader of that tribe was a respected man known as Pathfinder. He had a beautiful daughter named Starfire, and over time, Kale developed feelings for her. However, Kale wasn't the only one who admired Starfire. A warrior from her tribe also wanted her affection. When he realized that Starfire's heart belonged to Kale, jealousy quickly turned into hatred, and from that moment on, he saw Kale as his rival. One day, Pathfinder met with the leaders of Kale's tribe to discuss an important matter. Heavy snowfall in the mountains had claimed the lives of many of his people, forcing them to search for a safer place to live. But that wasn't the only reason for the gathering. Pathfinder had decided it was finally time to retire. To choose his successor, he announced a special competition that would determine who would become the next Pathfinder. Hearing this, Kale was eager to participate and prove himself. Unfortunately, the tribe leaders refused to let him join. In their eyes, Kale would never truly belong among them. No matter how many years he had lived there, he was still considered an outsider. The rejection hit him hard. Frustrated and disappointed, Kale walked away from the gathering. He began thinking that perhaps he would always be alone, and that he needed to find his own path in life. The only thing he still carried from his past was the sword he had possessed since childhood. The next morning, while hunting alone, Kale noticed something unusual near the shoreline. At first, he couldn't believe his eyes. The Vikings had returned. At that moment, Kale was far away from his village, standing on a distant hill. Before he could react, the Vikings launched a brutal attack on his tribe. The peaceful settlement was completely unprepared for the invasion. Kale rushed back as fast as he could, hoping to save his people. But when he arrived, it was already too late. The entire village had been destroyed. Homes were burning, bodies were scattered everywhere, and the tribe he had grown up with had been wiped out. Only a handful of survivors remained alive, and even they were being tortured by the Vikings for amusement. Watching this horrifying scene filled Kale with uncontrollable rage. Even though he knew he was hopelessly outnumbered, he refused to stand by and do nothing. Without hesitation, he charged directly toward the enemy. The Viking leader was intrigued by Kale's bravery. Instead of killing him immediately, he wanted to see how far this lone warrior could go. Amused by his courage, he ordered several Vikings to face Kale one after another. Kale fought fiercely, cutting down enemy after enemy. His determination was incredible, but there were simply too many Vikings. No matter how skilled he was, he couldn't defeat an entire army by himself. Realizing this, Kale changed his strategy. Rather than continuing a hopeless battle, he used his intelligence. After killing one of the warriors and taking his shield and weapons, he escaped into the wilderness. Enraged by his defiance, the Viking captain ordered his men to hunt him down. But this was Kale's land now. He knew every hill, every forest, and every hiding place. Using the terrain to his advantage, Kale disappeared into the wilderness. One by one, he ambushed the Vikings from the shadows, silently eliminating them before they even knew what had happened. The hunters had unknowingly become the hunted. As Kale continued hunting the Vikings through the wilderness, a few warriors suddenly spotted him from behind. Before he could react, an arrow came flying toward him and struck him, leaving him badly injured. Kale knew that if he stopped fighting now, he would lose not only the battle, but also his life. With no other option left, he threw himself into the water below and disappeared from sight. The Vikings searched for him everywhere, but the river carried him away before they could finish him off. The surviving Vikings eventually returned to their leader and reported that Kale had escaped. The news filled the Viking chief with uncontrollable rage. Furious at their failure, he killed 2 of his own men on the spot and warned the rest that Kale must be found at any cost. To the Viking leader, Kale was far more valuable than anyone else. He believed that the young warrior knew the location of other nearby tribes, and if they followed him, they could uncover new villages to conquer and destroy. Meanwhile, after escaping through the river, Kale drifted far away and eventually collapsed inside a cave. Exhausted from his wounds and blood loss, he lost consciousness. Sometime later, hunters from Pathfinder's tribe happened to discover him. Seeing his condition, they immediately decided to help. But the moment Kale realized who they were, he desperately tried to warn them. He begged them to leave him behind. He told them that the Vikings were hunting him and that anyone who stayed near him would be putting their lives in danger. However, the hunters refused to abandon him and carried him back to their village. By the time they arrived, Kale had completely passed out. The tribe treated his injuries and took care of him until he finally regained consciousness. When he woke up and realized the Vikings hadn't attacked yet, he immediately requested to meet the tribe's leaders. He explained everything that had happened and revealed that his entire tribe had already been slaughtered. Kale warned them that the Vikings were now searching for him and that eventually they would come looking for this village as well. He urged everyone to leave immediately and find a safer place before it was too late. But not everyone was willing to listen. The warrior who already disliked Kale became angry and dismissed his warning. Confident in his tribe's strength, he declared that they would fight the Vikings and kill them if they ever arrived. Instead of arguing, Kale decided to show them the truth. He drew his sword and instantly shattered the wooden weapon the warrior was carrying. The demonstration shocked everyone around him. Kale explains that the Vikings possessed weapons unlike anything they had ever seen before. Their strength, armor, and battle experience were far beyond what the tribe could handle. According to him, survival depended on wisdom, not pride, and hiding was their only chance. Unfortunately, most of the tribes still refused to believe him. Realizing that his warnings were falling on deaf ears, Kale decided to leave and continue his fight alone. But as he walked away from the village, he noticed someone following him. It turned out to be one of the tribe members who had listened carefully to everything he said. Unlike the others, this man believed Kale's story and chose to join him. Not long afterward, the warriors who doubted Kale traveled to the ruins of his destroyed village. The moment they arrived, they saw the horrifying truth with their own eyes. Burned homes, countless corpses, and strange Viking weapons were scattered everywhere. At that moment, they finally realized that Kale had been telling the truth all along. Fear quickly spread through the tribe, and many people began discussing hiding inside the caves to protect themselves from the coming invasion. But Pathfinder, the proud leader of the tribe, hated the idea of running away. He believed that a leader should stand and fight, no matter the odds. Determined to defend his people, he announced that he would face the Vikings himself. However, Starfire immediately understood how dangerous that decision was. She knew that courage alone would not be enough to defeat such ruthless enemies. More importantly, she knew that no one understood the Vikings better than Kale. Without his knowledge and experience, their chances of survival would be almost non-existent. Because of this, Starfire sought out Kale personally. She pleaded with him to help her people and admitted that they could not win this battle without him. For Kale, the decision was never truly difficult. He had loved Starfire for years, and when she asked for his help, he simply couldn't refuse. Putting aside his anger and pain, Kale agreed to stand beside her and help defend the tribe against the coming storm. Knowing that a direct battle against the Vikings would be suicide, the tribe first hid their women, children, and elders deep inside the caves. Meanwhile, the remaining warriors prepared themselves for war. Kale then stepped forward and shared his strategy. He explained that fighting the Vikings head-on would only lead to disaster. Instead, they needed to strike from the shadows, attack unexpectedly, and disappear before the enemy could respond. According to Kale, this was the only way a smaller force could stand against such powerful warriors. Following his plan, the tribe launched a series of surprise attacks. Their tactics worked brilliantly at first. Several Vikings were killed, and the enemy struggled to understand where the attacks were coming from. However, one mistake changed everything. While attempting another ambush, Kale and his allies accidentally fell into a trap. This time, it was the Vikings who had anticipated their movements. Surrounded on all sides, the tribe's warriors were quickly overwhelmed and captured. The Vikings showed no mercy whatsoever. Anyone who resisted was slaughtered immediately. Countless tribe members were brutally killed, and only a handful survived long enough to be taken prisoner. Among the captives were Pathfinder, Starfire, Kale, and a few remaining warriors. As soon as the Viking leader laid eyes on Kale, something caught his attention. He immediately sensed that Kale was different from the others. There was something familiar about him. The leader remembered the stories passed down among the Vikings. Years ago, during a previous expedition to these lands, the son of a powerful Viking chief had disappeared without a trace. Looking closely at Kale, he became convinced that this lost child was standing right in front of him. The Viking leader approached him and revealed the truth. He told Kale that no matter how much he tried to deny it, Viking blood flowed through his veins. According to him, Kale belonged with them, not with the tribes he was protecting. Then he offered Kale a choice: help the Vikings find the locations of other tribes, or watch everyone he cared about die. Naturally, Kale refused. Furious by his answer, the Vikings decided to force his hand. To pressure him, they executed Pathfinder right in front of everyone. The tribe leader died bravely, refusing to beg for mercy even in his final moments. But the Vikings weren't finished. They then threatened Starfire's life. Seeing the woman he loved standing on the edge of death, Kale finally appeared to surrender. With no other option left, he agreed to cooperate. To everyone watching, it looked like Kale had betrayed them. Starfire was heartbroken. She believed that Kale was now leading the Vikings directly to the hiding place of her people. The trust she once had in him began to disappear. However, neither Starfire nor the Vikings knew the truth. Kale wasn't helping them at all. He was secretly deceiving them. Instead of leading the Vikings to the caves where the tribe members were hiding, Kale took them to another location entirely. He guided them toward the snowy settlement that had once been abandoned by Pathfinder's people before they moved deeper into the mountains. During the journey, some Vikings attempted to harass Starfire. The moment Kale saw this, he completely lost his patience. He attacked the men without hesitation and protected her from them. The Viking leader was furious when he witnessed this. Yet, surprisingly, he chose not to punish Kale. Deep down, he felt a strange connection to the young warrior. In his eyes, Kale wasn't an enemy. He was a fellow Viking who simply hadn't accepted his true identity yet. Eventually, they arrived at the abandoned tribe settlement. But after searching the area, the Vikings discovered that there was nobody there. Confused, the Viking leader demanded an explanation. He asked Kale where they needed to go next. Without hesitation, Kale replied that they had to continue moving north. The problem was that everyone knew what lay in that direction. Far to the north was nothing but the sea. There were no villages, no settlements, and no signs of civilization. At that moment, the Viking leader became suspicious. He started believing that Kale had been misleading them from the very beginning. Realizing that the Vikings were beginning to doubt him, Kale quickly came up with another plan. Using his intelligence, he scattered belongings and supplies from the tribe throughout the area, creating false clues that made it appear as though people had recently passed through. For the moment, his deception worked, and the Vikings continued following the trail he had created. The fake clues Kale had planted worked perfectly. The Vikings found the scattered belongings and immediately brought them to their leader. After examining the items, they became convinced that Kale had been telling the truth. In their minds, the fleeing tribe had definitely traveled north. At that moment, Starfire finally understood what was really happening. Kale wasn't betraying anyone. He had been misleading the Vikings from the very beginning, and clearly, he had a much bigger plan in mind. The group continued their journey and eventually reached the frozen shoreline. The weather had become brutally cold. The sea itself was now covered in ice, creating a dangerous path across the frozen surface. Kale immediately warned everyone about the risk. He suggested turning back and taking a safer route through the forests. According to him, the ice was too thin, and there was a very real chance that it could break beneath their feet. But the Viking leader's pride wouldn't allow him to listen. Furious at the suggestion, he mocked Kale and declared that Vikings were not cowards. No matter how dangerous the path was, they would continue moving forward across the frozen sea. This was exactly what Kale had been hoping for. He knew the Vikings well enough to predict their reaction. Their pride would never allow them to retreat. If everything went according to plan, the frozen sea itself would become their enemy. As the guide, Kale deliberately moved forward slowly and carefully. He knew where the ice was stronger and where it was weakest. However, after moving farther ahead, even he suddenly crashed through a thin section of ice and plunged into the freezing water below. The moment the ice broke beneath him, chaos erupted everywhere. Several Vikings lost their footing and fell into the freezing sea as well. Among them was the warrior who was holding Starfire captive. As he sank into the icy water, he desperately grabbed Starfire and tried to drag her down with him. Even while struggling for his own life, Kale heard Starfire's cries for help. Without hesitation, he swam toward her. Fighting against the freezing water, he reached her just in time, broke the chain restraining her, and pulled her to safety. After a difficult struggle, both of them managed to escape the deadly sea and reach the snowy mountains beyond. Even now, the Vikings still hadn't realized that they were walking directly into Kale's trap. The mountain path they were following wasn't random. Long ago, the people of the original snowy tribe had created these hidden routes to travel through the mountains safely. Kale was now using those same paths to lead the Vikings deeper into dangerous territory. The journey became increasingly difficult. Narrow paths clung to steep cliffs, and one wrong step could mean death. Before long, one Viking lost his balance and slipped off the mountain path. The others watched helplessly as he disappeared into the frozen sea below. The accident frightened everyone. To prevent further losses, the Viking leader ordered every warrior to tie themselves together with ropes. That way, if one man slipped, the others could pull him back to safety. However, the leader had another motive as well. He deliberately tied Starfire to his own rope. His thinking was simple. If he ever fell, Starfire would fall with him. And if Starfire's life was at risk, Kale would be forced to save him too. As they continued walking through the mountains, Kale quietly spoke to Starfire in her own language. He told her to hit him. At first, Starfire was completely confused. She couldn't understand why Kale would ask for such a thing. But after thinking about it, she realized he must be working on another plan. Trusting him, she suddenly began attacking him and shouting at him in front of everyone. The Viking leader immediately noticed the confrontation. Watching Starfire strike Kale filled him with anger. He stepped forward, slapped Starfire across the face, and then turned toward Kale. To everyone's shock, he placed a knife in Kale's hand. Then, staring directly into his eyes, the Viking leader gave him a horrifying order. He told Kale to kill Starfire. Kale slowly accepted the knife from the Viking leader. For a moment, everyone believed he was about to obey the order and kill Starfire. But instead of turning the blade against her, Kale suddenly slashed the rope that connected Starfire to the Viking leader. Before anyone could react, he grabbed a stone from the ground and hurled it toward the last Viking standing in the line. The stone struck its target perfectly. The warrior lost his balance and slipped from the narrow mountain path. The moment he fell, disaster followed. Because all the Vikings were tied together with ropes, one falling man dragged the next with him. Within seconds, warrior after warrior began tumbling down the mountainside like a chain reaction. Realizing what was happening, the Viking leader acted quickly and cut his own rope before he could be pulled to his death. However, Kale was still connected to him. As the final Viking crashed into the abyss below, the force of his fall yanked both Kale and the Viking leader off the cliff as well. At the last possible moment, they managed to grab onto a tree growing from the mountainside. The Viking leader climbed back onto solid ground first. Instead of helping Kale, he immediately began throwing rocks down at him, hoping to finish him off once and for all. Kale found himself trapped. Hanging from the edge of the mountain, injured and exhausted, he knew there was almost no chance of escape. Accepting his situation, he shouted at Starfire and ordered her to leave immediately. He didn't want her risking her life for him. Reluctantly, Starfire began moving away. Then Kale did something unexpected. He let out a loud, strange cry that echoed across the mountains. The sound triggered a massive disturbance in the unstable ice surrounding them. Suddenly, huge sections of ice cracked apart and collapsed. An avalanche of snow and ice came crashing down, swallowing both Kale and the Viking leader. Together, they were dragged off the mountainside and buried beneath the frozen chaos. Yet somehow, neither of them died. Bruised and battered, both warriors managed to survive the fall. As soon as they regained their footing, the final battle between them began. The fight was brutal. Years of hatred, pain, and loss exploded into a single confrontation. Blow after blow was exchanged as they battled across the frozen landscape. Eventually, Kale gained the upper hand. For the first time, the mighty Viking leader found himself completely defeated. Knowing that death was approaching, he tried one final attempt to save himself. Looking directly at Kale, he reminded him of their shared bloodline. He told Kale that he was the last surviving member of his own people, and asked whether he truly intended to kill the final Viking of his generation. But Kale didn't hesitate, not even for a second. Without showing mercy, he swung his sword and ended the Viking leader's life, finally bringing an end to the nightmare that had haunted these lands for years. With the death of their leader, every Viking who had invaded the land was gone. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Many of Kale's friends and allies had lost their lives during the war. But despite those sacrifices, he had achieved the impossible. He had saved his people. The surviving tribe members had been hiding safely inside a cave near a frozen lake. When Kale and Starfire finally arrived there, everyone came forward to greet them. The people knew exactly who had saved them. Without Kale's courage, intelligence, and sacrifice, none of them would still be alive. One by one, they bowed before him. The tribe that had once treated him like an outsider now accepted him completely. They chose Kale as their new pathfinder, their new leader, and placed their future in his hands. For the first time in his life, Kale truly belonged. Not because of the blood flowing through his veins, but because of the choices he had made and the people he had protected. Soon after, Kale and Starfire were united in marriage. Together, they began a new chapter of their lives. The orphaned boy who had once washed ashore from a broken Viking ship had finally found a family, a home, and a people who loved him. And with peace finally returning to the land, Kale and Starfire looked forward to a future filled with happiness, bringing this epic story to a beautiful and satisfying end.